One of the winners in the Responsible Tourism Awards today is Sapa O Chow from Vietnam, and unfortunately we tried very hard to get her to come over, but we weren't able to find enough money to bring her over to the awards. So we asked her to produce a short video for this session. What is interesting about Sapa O Chow from my point of view is that for 2 years now they've been doing a social impact report of actually a very high quality. And it's interesting to see a small business in Vietnam doing that.
Hello, Sapa Chow is the social enterprise and to create job opportunity and education for the youth and minority in this area. In here, in our coffee shop and the office here, we hire 50 staff who are working with us. 66% of women, 92% are ethnic minority, 377 dependents, 100% female owned. All this support SDG 8 and 12. Here you can have a seat. This display is a boarding facility for our students. 49 youths reached in 2016. 196 youth reached since 2010. Half female youth. 100 rural poor ethnic minority. All this support SDG 8. And also you can see Sapa Chow what we are doing and connect with others. 84 blood community serve. 348 volunteers work with us. 71 blood partnership B2B private public. 8,000 plus reach on social media with Sapa Chow. All these support SDG 8 and 12. Thank you so much and have a good day.
This is a tiny enterprise in Vietnam, communicating with the world using modern social media and also talking about the SDGs that they're able to perform against. And obviously it's not slick, but you can see why that would engage people. But let's move on.
Hello everyone. I think I'll just make a start because I have just got 8 minutes and I hope I can do all my slides within that time. So just for an introduction to what we do, I would like to just straight away go to the next slide, which states how we actually began our journey back in 2004 when we started working in a protected area in the Binsa Wildlife Sanctuary, which is in the northern Himalayan region of a small state of Uttarakhand in India. And primarily, the reason why we started is to curb the major problem within the sanctuary, which was out-migration of people to the nearby towns or cities in search of jobs and work. Because being a wildlife sanctuary, there were many laws implicated on the people for their basic survival. Also, they were struggling. So at that stage, we had these challenges that the communities were in need of an alternate source of livelihood, and they were very largely bypassed by any benefits from tourism, because though despite tourism being a major source of livelihood in the state, these benefits were not reaching any of these villages. And as I just said, that they were under serious threat of out-migration, and there was a lack of confidence, a lack of social security, and women in particular, considering that the state of living they were in, they were very reluctant to participate, or there was actually no willingness also to participate in any livelihood activities, including, of course, tourism was even a bigger taboo. So I'll straight away go to now, after the introduction, I would straight away go now to the concept of village ways. And the concept states that we develop individual village-owned tourism enterprises, and by individual I mean village-wise. So it is not just one family we are talking about. We talk about an enterprise which is owned and run by the entire community. So that brings in why in the later slides I will explain why the impacts and the evaluation and the data collection becomes more important, because here you are talking about the engagement of a village rather than an individual family. So at the later case, when the income starts generating into the villages, it becomes even more important to know what the benefits are, what are the measures we are taking, and can we actually showcase and share it with the guests who are visiting or the communities we are working, and for ourselves as well. Now, coming back to the market concept, apart from this being an enterprise for the village, it also rewards, the guests of a unique holiday itinerary. A guest visits an area which is generally not covered in any tourism sector. So they are actually able to visit these places and have privileged access to these community sites where we are working. And they have the opportunity to live the closest form of village life. So actually, because they are being hosted by the local communities, so they have that access to the heart of the village in a way. So what were our aims? I think in the beginning, the desired outcomes for us, for the guests who visited, was, as I said, privileged access. Then there was rewarding social connection with the host villages, celebration of the place, and a wish to repeat the experience in other areas which we have observed. Because when I come to the impacts, we have been observing that these things have actually worked. What would be the desired outcomes for the hosts? So it obviously means a secondary income. We have always stressed that this has to be a secondary income rather than the only income of the village, because tourism has always to be, it has to run alongside the traditional practices. So emphasis has to be on secondary income. And it also flows that the even economic flow across village families. So since it is not limited to one household, we always feel that this should be spread across as many families as possible in the village. Capacity building through trainings is, once we are ready with our enterprises, then comes the challenge of training the communities to run the enterprises to a standard and then be able to with confidence host guests in the villages. So we have been doing that, and then increase employment and reduce out migration. And finally, of course, the low impact tourism, which is expected to be an outcome. So where we are after 10 years, our pilot area, Binsa Sanctuary, we worked in 5 villages, and today we are working in 23 villages in India and Nepal. And that means approximately 2,900 bed nights annually, and we are trying to increase that, and we are hoping that it will increase. And these are the impacts which we have observed after 10 years. So, I just told you about the objectives, the initial objectives. So we are actually able to raise the secondary income. We are able to benefit the other families in the villages. We have been able to bring in new skills, and people have developed the confidence to host guests in the villages and rebuild the pride that they actually were losing in their surroundings, in the environment, the traditional aspects, the cultural aspects. And we can see that there is a growing entrepreneurship in the communities, because like for example, we had many youngsters moving to the towns in search of jobs, and when they came back to the village for being trained as a guide, today they are walking with the guides. They are happily in their villages, earning a livelihood, but also enjoying a raised confidence level, a sense of pride. So we have seen that there is a growing entrepreneurship in the village, and also since all these structures which we built are traditional architecture, so we are using the local carpentry, the local masonry, and these skills which which were also dying in a way. So we have been promoting the traditional skills in architecture. And how do we measure? Now, I think, as I said, that is very important to make the communities also understand. And here we are talking about communities who could be educated. There could be communities who have no education, and there could be communities with medium level of education. So the monitoring has to be such that they are able to conduct it themselves, because our model of monitoring, the very simple model of coding the villages and each family, I think it was a simple methodology which they have been able to adapt and accept. So That was one. And then, of course, the other measures we use are, for example, we've set post-holiday feedback. So every guest who comes certainly is briefed well about the holiday experience that they expect and what kind of community engagement is there. And they would also focus their feedbacks on those aspects. And in fact, that is the reason I think many guests who come and repeat their holidays, because they really like the experience and they feel that they had the trust on our product, and probably we lived up to it, so they repeated the holidays. In terms of the out migration, whether it has actually reduced or whether it has been, there's never a case when it can be completely eradicated. But of course, because we have a simple system of coding the families and the number of households, it's very easy to trace if one family has moved out or perhaps a member has joined in. So this system, as I said, is so simple that we can actually trace these very easily, the out migration. So as I just mentioned to you, this is the simple coding. And the yearly income is recorded because all our banking systems are very clear. We have set up very transparent systems with the communities to record what is going into the villages as per income, and what income is being then dispersed by them through the coding. So they are able to easily extract and save this data, and this data is then analyzed by a third party. We have actually been taking help from Just Report, who are using a yardstick model to measure and analyze the raw data which comes from the villages. So these are I'll just go through these basically a few results of the impacts. If I can just, so just to touch upon that, we have now about 261 families of 18 different castes who are working across wherever we are working, and 54% employed from families below poverty line. These are some indicators now which are coming from the impact studies, and these are of course the analysis which I think you can probably just have a quick look at this, which I can explain at the question and answer session. And this is the yardstick reporting format that I was explaining, where every individual in the family is coded, and then whenever there is a fund dispersal, these codes are maintained by the local community. So it's a very easy system for them to follow, and it can be rechecked by us because they have to all match with our records. So these are some interesting results that we have, through yardstick we have been able to get, and these are working very well for our communities also to understand and to know how many families are involved, what proportion of women are involved, what are the below poverty line people involved in the communities, gender balances in each village, what is the percentage of women employment. And for anecdotal evidence, we have these from VT feedbacks. We have committee meetings every quarter. So we speak to the communities very regularly. I think that's one very easy way to know the impacts on the communities, because we get to know what challenges are being faced and what families are coming back, or if there is any new challenge which has come. So these are, I think, our overall impacts. If you can see this, there's a fairer division of employment across gender, and there is, increase of local produce. So anything which is sourced within the village is used for the guests. And awareness of wildlife, of course, in 2 protected areas now we are working in, also in Madhya Pradesh, and having invited by a government department to work there, because they have been very impressed with the impacts that they have seen of our work in one of the protected areas in Binsar. And, who needs to know, of course, is that, as I said, that we need to know, because we are, of course, our objective was to create these positive impacts on the communities, make sure that the tourism is actually contributing positively and making good impacts on the communities, and the guests who are expecting certain returns from their holidays, apart from the holiday experience, as well as whether they are contributing positively to the communities they are visiting and the areas they are visiting. And the regional government, yes, because now we are being supported by the government. Initially, we were doing more of our work independently. But having said that, lately we have been involved with, as I said, Madhya Pradesh government, who has seen our work. So it's actually these evidences and impacts, they really help a lot for us to showcase what we are doing, whether we are achieving this, and what have been our challenges. So it is easier for them to replicate these ideas into other areas. So, with the government also, this reporting is tremendously helping us a lot. That's it, I think, from me. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Harold, for having Marine Dynamics here. We would not give up an opportunity to actually showcase something that we are doing in a very small part of South Africa and ultimately showcase the species that we work with, which is the white shark and African penguin primarily. So we're very happy to be here today. I know we're reporting on 8 and 12, but our strength is wildlife conservation. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our projects, but through that we have grown, we're creating employment, we're creating new projects, and I'm going to just touch on them as I go. Okay, so first off, where are we based? We're just a couple of hours out of Cape Town in a place called Gansbaai. Gansbaai is traditionally is primarily a fishing village, but we have the shark cage diving industry there, and we are seeing 85,000 visitors just for shark cage diving, and we also do whale watching. So we have this incredible Dyer Island ecosystem. Dyer Island is a protected area. It's an important bird area, IBA, as declared by BirdLife. So we have a population of endangered African penguin there, as well as 15 other seabirds. So primarily, that is our mission, to discover and understand this area that we're working in, protect the species that we work with, and then obviously educate people that we work with in turn so that they become ambassadors for these species, which we're very lucky to do because we're seeing about 30,000 people through our businesses, and every day we get to tell the message. So just a little bit of how we structured. Marine Dynamics is kind of the primary business. Now, I just want to backtrack a little bit to 2000 when we started, because what I am going to show you today looks like we have this incredible thing, but like most of you, it doesn't happen overnight. And our CEO, Wilfred, literally started this business in 2000, answering his own calls, taking his own bookings with one rubber duck. So what I'm going to show you today, just know that it is possible with good leadership, a good team, good partnerships, both with tour operators and conservation partners, to actually achieve what we're achieving. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to. We also have separate businesses, some of which are shown up top there. And sometimes that can be very confusing for people who walk in, but we're literally really interdependent. We don't exist without each other. So we have a base, which is the Great White House, where we receive all our clients. It's a restaurant in its own right, but it primarily services our clients every day. And so we're seeing a couple of hundred people through our doors. So across all those businesses, we're doing our best to mitigate, from recycling to using grey water, low energy, etc., solar geyser. Wherever we can, we are trying to make a difference. We don't profess to get everything right. Obviously, our businesses have impact. We're going out on boats every day. We use fuel. We have impact. So how do we mitigate it? And we're doing the best we can in the way we can. You'll see there we have over 90 employed people, many of them local. Primarily as well, we also have different skills. So we have marine biologists, and there's different skills, but we use those people in all different ways that actually cover our businesses. They say we've actually probably underestimated dependence there slightly, but because the standard is about 4.5. So we know it's not just about our local people supporting their children. They're supporting a gran and aunt. They're often sending money back to their hometown in the Eastern Cape to actually support their families. So it's actually quite diverse. So one of the other things we've done, we started with a rubber duck. I joined, and I've been working there since 2009. There were 27 people there, so just to show you the growth we've had in quite a short period. But one of the things that has always been done is reinvesting. We actually built a very much bigger boat than anybody else in the industry way back in 2010, when we were experiencing quite a recession post-World Cup, Soccer World Cup. So we've invested. We recently built a new whaleboat as well. We've changed the way the industry works. We can take people in wheelchairs. We take children. We take elderly. It's not just a backpacker experience at all anymore. This is showcasing the marine world. So enterprise development, we support various enterprise development within our own staff. We have one of our staff is running a driving school. We encourage our own staff to get their licenses, skippers' licenses if they can. Any of those things they can take away from us one day, but they've got those skills that they can use anywhere they go. We have support locally as much as possible. We buy from regular local crafters. We've been working with them for many of them for quite some years. And where we can, we are obviously supporting different businesses in our area. Mentorship as well is on there. I mean, I've watched some of the staff grow, English improve, they've got their skippers, and it's really wonderful to see that growth. And we are subject to permit regulations by the Department of Environmental Affairs, and we've all just recently applied, and we are helping, we have set up a company with our staff and helping them apply for that permit as well. So we await the permit decisions. Some of the way we reach people, obviously I've already said we have about 30,000 people coming through, but our marketing efforts are extensive. There's only a couple of us of the 8 operators that are actually coming and talking on an international platform, attending shows. It benefits the industry, it benefits our area, our country, but we really are putting our money forward. We spend a huge amount on our websites, our social media, our agent visits, etc. So you can see some of the figures there. If anybody wants more of this, we can go through it. I won't spend too much time. But the shows we've been attending for years have built our relationships. Next up, media and filming. We work with many, obviously working with white sharks and these iconic species. National Geographic and Discovery has a great interest there. So we work with them. I'm going to talk more about our conservation trust now. But what we do there is actually put the funding through the trust. So we bill a film crew through the conservation trust, and any profits stay in our conservation trust. So that is a bit of an income generator for us as well with our conservation. But we are reaching quite a lot of people through that. I don't know if any of the British people here saw us on ITV a little while ago with the Silver Fox. And then awards and certifications. I know there's been a lot of debate about this. This, again, just puts us on that international platform, like being able to speak here today, to showcase those species, to showcase the work that is being done. All of this is on our website. So how do we actually do the work we're doing? We established the Conservation Trust in 2006. It started with the African penguin, but it's become about so much more. Okay, the white shark research is intensive. We are producing population studies, environmental parameters affecting sharks, wound healing. We're looking at predation and orca that we're currently experiencing, which has really affected our industry. But this is some world first that we're seeing coming out of our area. We have a population of white sharks that is possibly only about 1,000. Internationally, maybe only 3,000 to 5,000. That is not great numbers. It has knock-on effects for seals predating on our penguins, etc., etc. So there's a huge ecosystem at play here. We've published over 20 scientific publications. We've supported masters, PhD. Our current student that you see there with the tagging of a shark is doing PhD studies on the white shark. So we constantly putting information out there. And the reason we do the conservation, this research, is to drive conservation decisions. We've been looked at a case studies, which you can also have there. We're affiliated with universities. The other thing we do that is quite critical, most people aren't going to read a scientific paper, infographics. It's the way to go if you want to get that message out there. These are on our homepage, and it really reaches a wider audience. We have a penguin sanctuary. Penguin population is also facing huge pressure. 90 birds lost a week. By 2030, possibly 90 birds a week, possibly gone. We opened the penguin sanctuary in 2015. These are kind of the numbers we're looking at for our population. One of the key things is getting birds back on Dyer Island, so they recognize that as their breeding colony. We have an 80% release rate. Reports are available if you need this. And then our Penguin Nest project, we've been doing this since 2006, is critical in the creating homes for penguins. And they face predator pressures. And we're busy with a new model now, and we'll roll it out. It's being sponsored by the American Zoo Association. We have volunteers coming from all over the world that are basically form an integral part of the team. But what I want to show you and showcase you when it comes more to community, we've obviously created employment, which is huge. We want our people to benefit from this. We've been doing work with schools and that for a long time, but I think it's been really hard to measure with children. And what we're doing now is a 3-year program. So the students are now in their second year, finishing off their second year. We take in a new intake every year, and those 13 students are becoming our disciples in the community. And these are kids that are at a school that is not at a level that some of the other schools are, but they're presenting to us, to their peers. It's quite incredible. They really are changing the way their parents think. And again, it's down to the right educator, that person there, Pinky, being able to reach that community. It's very different me walking in there and telling a community how to behave, what to do. So those kids are going back and telling their parents, why would you litter like this, you know? Our marine pollution efforts are huge as well. But in the future, we're going more solar power. We couldn't do that on our penguin sanctuary just to cost in South Africa, but that's our next step. We hope to have a marine training academy as well. And we are building a marine center where we can have people having conferences, etc. And that, again, is going to create more employment. So it's quite diverse. There's a lot of stuff on our websites that you can look at, a lot of video. I'd love to be able to show you all that. Please chat to me afterwards if you've got any questions about shark cage diving. Our key message is your choice makes a difference. So we're very grateful to our tourism operators that help us do this work. And I hope one day one of our deep children, one of those kids, are here speaking to you in a few years to come.
Good evening, everybody. So my name is Richard Vine. I'm from the Olpejita Conservancy in Kenya. How do I flick this on? Just right-hand key. There we go. Thanks. So I suppose the thing I should really talk about is the basic philosophy of what we feel conservation in the modern world is. We're actually a conservation organization. Tourism for us is a means to finance conservation, and that's the reason that we're involved in it. So we get around about 85,000 visitors per year. That's up over the past 10 years from around about 15,000, so it's grown pretty quickly. But we take a view that the way conservation is carried out across the planet is going to have to change. So gone are the days of what I refer to as fortress conservation. What I mean by fortress conservation is this idea that you have national parks from which all forms of any kind of productive human activity tend to be excluded. The problem with that is, certainly in Kenya, and this applies to very many other parts of the globe, we only have about 8% of our land area set aside, and that is simply not enough to maintain the kind of ecological, the ecosystem processes that are required to carry large populations of species such as elephant and etc. So for us, we're looking the world, but in particular Kenya needs to look for new models of securing space for conservation at the same time as making that space productive to accommodate the needs of growing human populations. And that basically is what underpins our philosophy in terms of how we go about securing our land area, our own land area, plus also making available more land area in future for, in particular, our expanding population of black rhinos. So Olpejita itself is around about 400 square kilometers. We're currently expanding into other areas using this model, which is a human-centric model. And we're surrounded by around about 57,000 what I would describe as rural poor. These are poor people living on very small sub-economic plots of land, struggling for their existence, and for whom, from whom, it is very important that they see value in us in order for us to succeed. In other words, if they, for whatever reason, decide that they are not supportive of our presence, our ability to achieve the kind of conservation I'm talking about at scale is going to fail. So just a little bit more about us. We're the biggest black rhino, or we're home to the biggest black rhino sanctuary in East Africa. We're a Key 1 population. That means that we have over 100 individuals. For those of you who know about rhino conservation, there are about 5,500 black rhinos left in the world, and there are 9 Key 1 populations across Africa. We're considered to be pioneers in the idea that that integrated land management systems can not only secure conservation space, but also by means of maximizing productivity, they can also create economic development opportunities beyond the traditional sort of economic activities that you would expect with protected areas such as tourism. And I think that the key point in all of this is because we've taken that approach, because we're maximizing productivity, because we're maximizing employment in the process, because we're paying taxable revenues, because we're seen to be a responsible member of society, albeit we own large acreages of land in a country where the population is growing and where land is in high demand, we're increasingly seen by government as a trusted development partner, not simply a kind of conservation area that has to be supported and possibly subsidized. And for us, that's very important. So we're commercially viable and we're commercially driven in the way that we work, but with a social conscience. As I've said, we're expanding as we speak, and the same model will be used and applied to make that expansion happen. It will be about creating economic opportunity. It will be about a human-centric approach that allows support to be garnered, not necessarily as a means to preserve rhinos, but as a means to create economic opportunity at the same time as creating a space for conservation. To support the communities around us, the flow of value from us is significant. You know, we have a variety of different programs that we run. We have the traditional programs that are often associated with conservation programs. So we support education, we support health, we support sustainable agriculture. Interestingly, the biggest value that the communities see from us is probably security. So we have our own security operations, which we need to secure our black rhino populations. Those security operations in turn provide a security cover to the local communities. And if you were to ask the people living in those communities, that's probably the biggest value that they would associate with us. Another big area for us is keeping rivers flowing. Another big area is resolving human-wildlife conflict. Again, this is something that happens a lot in Africa, but on the edges of wilderness areas, the conflict between humans and wildlife and the impact that conflict has on livelihoods is a very significant thing that we feel has to be dealt with, and it has to be dealt with the involvement of those humans who are being affected. Right now, we're spending somewhere in the region of $1 million, just short last year, about $800,000 on this program. We do try to make it as bottom-up as possible. So we have a series of elected community representatives who act as the interface between their communities and us. Those elected officials are rotated on a regular basis. So it's accountable, hopefully, as well as being transparent. And the way we measure it is using a tool called SAPA that some of you may have come across. SAPA was developed by a consortium of conservation organizations led by Fauna and Flora International. It stands for the Social Assessment of Protected Areas. And basically it uses community-based enumerators to collect data on a randomized, kind of objectivized basis with a view then to making an assessment about the impact that the conservation area is having on those local communities. We do this once every couple of years. We've been doing it now for the last 6 years. And the last survey we did was in 2016, where of those 57,000 people that live around us, somewhere in the region of 80% said that they had received some benefit of some form from us. So that for us was a pretty good indicator that whilst we are most definitely not perfect, we have the support of those people and they see us as valuable to have within their midst. So increasingly as we go forwards on our community programs, we're moving more from sweets over the fence, so schools being built or whatever, to genuine partnerships. What I mean by that is finding ways of providing real tangible value in the communities that arises as a result of their relationship with us. So simple examples would be selling curios, selling handicrafts through our retail outlets to the 85,000 people who we have coming through our gates. But there are other examples of that. So looking at livestock production and marketing, we integrate cattle with wildlife. That provides a platform for local pastoralist communities to access markets get better genetics, and so on and so forth. So that for us is the next step in the community program, and we feel it's fundamentally important. Ultimately, we're probably going to be looking at a shareholding model whereby those communities actually have shares in our business and receive a dividend off the back of our success on an annual basis. And Olpejita itself, just to finalize quickly, our objectives over the next few years, we aim to have 200 black rhinos by 2027. That's over 112,000 acres. That's another 40,000 acres of land that's got to be secured. That costs an awful lot of money. We're looking at investments of around about $5 million to make that happen. We aim to up our spend in the community development programs through those partnership programs that I've talked about to about $2 million a year. We're looking for maximizing, again, this economic kind of engine that we've created to maximize the surplus that we create, all of which will be reinvested back into conservation and community development. So we're not an organization that sits and asks for donor incomes to support ourselves. We would much rather be the managers of our own destiny. And if we can make profit, that enables us to be able to do that. We aim to be fully solar by 2019. We aim to have all our waste fully recycled by 2019, and we have 8 lodges, so that's quite a big challenge. And we aim to be working across a much larger landscape to promulgate and develop this model as we go forwards. Thank you.
Our CEO, Glenn O'Leary, is sitting languishing in a hospital bed in London with malaria. Poor fellow. And hence why I accepted our award, which I was very happy to do today, but I'm also giving this presentation. And before I get to go to share more about how we've created the shared value within our communities, I just want to have a little anecdote about a school in South Africa called the Morris Brothers, who are doing amazing work with educating refugee children from various countries in Africa. And at a presentation that the headmaster was giving to a whole lot of people about the success of this scheme, he quoted saying, despite the fact that the school's motto is to educate with humility, there are times when you have to brag with humility. And on behalf of Glyn and TFPD's team, I hope you'll allow me to indulge in a little bit of bragging with, of course, humility. TFPD, Transfrontier Parks Destinations, does not own any of the properties, the camps, the safari lodges that it works with. They are all owned by the 40 or so communities that we are working with. Most of these properties are in very remote areas, difficult to get to, difficult to work in. And it begs the question, where does the asset lie? For TFPD, the asset, of course, lies only in the the management contracts that we have with these communities to get these businesses up and going and to be successful. But for many of the communities, they looked at what they had been given after apartheid. Land was given back. Some even had lodges built. But they were not given skills, they were not given money to complete, and many of these projects were incomplete on handover. They were underfunded to start with. They were without operational skills and experience. No one was there to educate. And many of them started to decay. I'm going to use 2 examples just to show you how the difference is that we've made. Castle Lodge, it was built in 2004, finished, well, sort of, in about 2007, never completely finished, and basically was abandoned and was decaying by the time we came along. One of the elders of the Khomani San, Opa Rekopstaan means stand up straight, capers, said to Glyn when he came to look at the property, the land was given but the rains haven't come. And they talk in stories, and this was them to say, we've got things, but we don't know how the hell to do this. So how can we do it? And this is what started the journey for TFPD. That is what it looked like, really appallingly built, really, really badly executed. And the same was with Witsiershoek, which in 2010 was about to be closed. Glyn actually was there when the king arrived. The king, Lekunuto Mota, had made the decision to close the lodge. And he happened to arrive on the day that Glyn had gone up to have a look. And the king, after 4 hours of discussion with Glyn, changed his mind. Basically, these staff hadn't been paid since the beginning of the year. This was October. Again, the infrastructure was decaying. These people had no idea and no skills to actually run a lodge. Guests had stopped coming. It was quite a complete disaster. So the big challenge for TFPD was how to find the money. And apart from rather limited personal resources, which they obviously put in, the conditions for success was raising money to make the difference, because you had to invest in the rehabilitation, the restructure, the training, everything that was needed for these properties. And so the rand for, at the moment, at that time, it was about 11 rand to the pound. Now it's about 17 or 18 rand to the pound. But it was a condition for success. We had to mobilize money, which we did. And we did it from various ways. We did, unlike Old Pedro, I wish we could say we had our own money in, but we didn't. We had to get state, donor, and commercial funding in. And we were able to raise 130.7 million rand. And this led to properties like Kaas that were literally fading away, becoming the most gorgeous spots in the middle of the Khadi, fair trade and tourism, really comfortable, really really welcoming, a very proud community there to serve you. We are of service. Let us show you our lodge. We can do this because we know how. And it really made all the difference. And the same for Witsiershoek. There's been incredible growth in economic and in work. People are employed not only at the lodges, as you'll see later, but in all the micro enterprises that we've started. Sorry, I talked far too much in my hands. So our journey, briefly, is where we started right back in 2006. And now, coming soon, we've got a whole lot of other projects that are on their way. In rural communities, unemployment is 50% higher than everywhere else in South Africa, and the average is 27.9. It's a really, really shocking statistic, and it's something that so needs to be looked at, because if people are employed, things like poaching and stuff like that just don't happen because there's no need to do it. So what we at the moment have are 147 full-time sustainable permanent jobs, 560 construction jobs, and these people have been used from local communities in the construction of the properties that we are involved in. And we say one job at a time. If we can create one job at a time, it means that 6.5 people are getting food in their tummies. 6.5 people in the communities are getting some sort of benefit. And this is without the micro enterprise that we've been talking about. And these we can really, we are able to track this and to report on these and on the income of these. The one area that we cannot track fully financially is the micro enterprise, because although we can track what we have helped set up and what people sell to us and what people sell to our guests, we don't always know what they have sold to other to other people within the community, to other lodges within the community, and we believe that it has grown exponentially. And I'm just going to speak to 2 or 3 examples. The Kamani sand crafters, they needed access to a market to sell their traditional crafts. House Lodge provided the place. They chose it. They chose this beautiful big thorn tree where they wanted to go for the crafters to access guests and access their markets. And the skill and crafting that was really thousands of years old is the most wonderful thing to behold. And it's created to date a 2 million turnover just on doing craftsmen. There's been a R1 million turnover on this extraordinary guy who makes furniture. Wittieshoek needed bedroom and dining room furniture. And he reverse engineered a lot of the old furniture that we had that was really grotty and grimy and and he created such beautiful pieces. And he earned, just on us, $1 million by manufacturing locally for the lodge. He has since gone on to do an awful lot more for a lot of other people. And Mr. Moletti is one of our fantastic micro tourist businesses. And I'm just going to end with one other, and that's our sacred salt spring, where these women for thousands, well, not these exact women, but women in the community for thousands of years have been harvesting the salt. It is of incredible high quality. We've had scientists look at it, and it is now in the slow food movement. It's exported overseas, and these women, from really making 10 to 20 rand a day, are now getting an average of 100,000 rand turnover, and is growing exponentially as the salt is being found and being exported in greater areas. It also has meant that from 5 harvesters, which was when we started, there are now 30 harvesters, which is an amazing thing. There are others, which I'm not going to stick to because we've only got 8 minutes. One of the big things that I think sets us apart is our transparency. We have never been afraid of showing our figures. We have never been afraid of saying where we've perhaps made an error and where we should perhaps make things better. And this is where Glyn in particular is extraordinary. We have what we call ndabas with all our communities at least every second month, where Glyn goes, and sometimes it's sitting in a kraal and lying down with a nduna, or it's sitting around discussing a marketing proposal that we've got, or there are these committee meetings that are held regularly where everything is discussed. Results are shown, we show where money's come from, we show what we want to do with it, are there in agreement, and the transparency and the communication is key to our success. So what is our success? Well, at the moment, it's 114.4 million has been generated. Employment is 39 million. Rental and asset development is 47.2 million. Micro enterprise share value is 6.4, but we think that's a lot bigger because we can only track what we know about. And local procurement is 68.6 million. Really, we want the staff to be able to speak for us. This is what some of them said when we did a little, we just spoke to them, or someone from outside the community came and said, what is the difference? What's helped you? One said, I was unable to provide for myself. It was hard to be honest. With my previous job, I lived away from home. Now I can be a parent to my children. And getting a job means I can pay back my tuition fees and further my education even more. But perhaps the best one of all is our head of security. Before the lodge opened and I got a job, in truth, I was a hobo. And these are the differences that we are making. And this is the way forward for sustainable tourism. Care of people, your communities, care of your land, care of your wildlife. With those three-legged pots of the pot, we can't fail. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Balakiran. I am Director Kerala Tourism from India. I would like to share my experiences regarding the responsible tourism journey in the southern state of India called Kerala. Before I get into the details of responsible tourism, let me also say that Kerala is a state with a population of 33 million, and it's at the southern end of India. We have, though the India got independence way back in 1947, Kerala woke up to tourism only 20 years back in a big way. That would be around 95, 96, 97 or so. Within 10 years, we realized Kerala being a naturally beautiful area, we have been getting semblances of problems when big ticket infrastructure is coming up in terms of tourism. So we decided in 2006, the then government, the then tourism secretary and the government officials, that there has to be something done for it, otherwise we might be losing the battle. So that's when the awakening has come up. Awakening has also come up for one more reason, that when tourism has entered the villages, the towns and the local areas, there has been a lot of resistance from the people. The resistance was mainly due to they believed that there was no local population being employed, no local resources being sourced. There's no any benefit to the local population, but the entire income is going to be taken by the hoteliers, by the tour operators and the like. So whenever we went to create a new destination, we faced huge protests, and from that protest also we had to address it amicably, and that one amicable solution which we found at that time was responsible tourism. Kerala, as I said, 70% of the present state economy is coming from tourism, so we are heavily dependent on tourism ourselves. So we had to act responsibly to keep this alive. So the journey started like this. We have developed a responsible tourism framework way back in 2006. We have hosted the second international conference on responsible tourism in various destinations. I'm very happy to inform that Dr. Harold Goodwin has been with us right from that day. We have set up a state-level consultative committee with the International Center of RT and local self-government bodies, civil societies, and of course the government departments. We have formed the state-level and district-level RT committees. We have identified pilot destinations to start our process, start our laboratory into existence. So these 4 places were Kumarikam, Kovalam, Wayanad and Tekadi, which are the 4 tourism destinations which has happened. I am saying all this specifically because we have heard the previous presentations from the local point of view. So I am trying to give a perspective from the government point of view, how it can actually enable responsible tourism to actually happen across the state, in fact, state or even country. So we found out that there are 3 main stakeholders. One, of course, we had to start the policy and support initiatives. We had to do a huge number of multi-sectoral stakeholder participation, and of course, we had to implement it on the ground. So this we have done it in this way. Policy and support initiatives, we decided that whoever is going to implement RT initiatives will be getting investment subsidy, will be getting subsidy on the electricity tariffs. We have already decided upon the administrative framework which will be implementing this particular format. And at the ground level, we had to implement the local self-government bodies. In Kerala, they are called Gram Panchayats. So we had to include the local governments, we had to include the stakeholders, we had to include the village level communities which are going to source these resources to the tourism industry. So this is that beautiful location called Kumaragam. Kumaragam is a land of backwaters in southern Kerala. The backwaters, if you would be wondering what is that, generally the river flows from high land to the sea. But when it is reaching the sea, during the high tide, the sea water is actually hitting back into the river, into the canals. So this is the backwater of the sea which is coming, which is a tremendously incredible location. So again, at 14th March 2018, we had a tripartite agreement with 18 hoteliers. So how it started? So that's what I'm explaining. So we had 18 hoteliers, 18 resort owners which have come together under the aegis of RTCL or the state government, and then we had the local body, which is the elected representatives of the local government, and of course we had something called a Kudumbashri, which is the women's collective, which is a self-help group of the women. So these three people had to come together, had a series of discussions, and had to form a format. So this format is actually driving from these 4 points. One, of course, as I said, that these are the 4 stakeholders. So these has to do a lot of groundwork for it to actually happen. One thing which you would all agree, and being the practitioners of or enthusiasts of responsible tourism, that responsible tourism, if it is done for charity, it is not going to sustain. It has to be economically viable. So we decided that responsible tourism has to be evaluated in 4 particular criteria. It has to be local participation had to be there. It has to be environmentally sustainable. It had to have corporate social responsibility, and of course, it had to merge all this together to form a very strong framework. So yes, we had formed the local supply chains. We had the Kudumbashri, which is a women's collective, run the ethnic restaurants by families. We had done the micro enterprises and group farming. We had done the excursions like village life experiences. All together has come together. So before I come to the impact study, I just want to share what is the present status. In 2006, you would not believe that not even a single rupee has been going to the local community. Not even one product has been sourced from the local community. No wonder the protests were extremely severe. Some of the resorts had to go back. Dr. Good Harold is a prime witness of all that right from that time. But then what is the situation now? Now 47 products have been locally sourced across these 18 to 19 hotels. These products are actually produced by almost, we call something called our responsible tourism unit. We have around 179 units now which are supplying all these 47 products to these 18 hotels. We have more than 2,300 families which are actually sourcing these products to these 174 units. Indirectly, more than 3,100 families are being benefited out of this. Over the last 11 years, more than 180 million rupees have been earned by the local community. Last year alone, in Kumaragam alone, we have earned more than 11 million rupees. So the average income varies from 10,000 rupees per month to one enterprising houseboat owner who have earned 1.5 lakh, that is 150,000 rupees in a month through his houseboat. So it had resulted in a huge positive change, and which we want to take it up to the entire state, to entire destinations in the state of Kerala. Before I give my future study, so we have done a impact study of what has happened in Kumaragam in the last 10 years, in fact last 8 years. So as I said, 3,100 households have been benefited, has been done, out of which we have taken around 14% of the households have been taken on survey. Involved in tourism, 2,163 people have been involved in tourism, and 947 have been out of this. 64% of the people who are involved in tourism has said that this has helped them positively, which is that good percentage, 64%. Around 1% people said that it hasn't benefited them much. 30% have said that it has benefited them. Also, there has been some negative aspects to it as well. Households which are not employed in tourism have been more optimistic about responsible tourism, which we found it's very surprising that 78% of people who have not been actually involved in responsible tourism but have been looking from outside felt that it is actually benefiting the community. 53% of the businesses have been selling to, not doing direct sale to the tourism. They have been selling to the RT units or to tourism businesses. 29% have been owning their own production units, and of course, direct sale to individual tourists have been done through various shops and all of 18%. Again, part-time employment is being done. They have their other employment, but they do this as a part-time. So 70% of the population is of the households are giving part-time, and 30% full-time. Off-season, there is a season we have in Kerala. The tourism season starts from October to February, March, and the remaining seasons due to monsoon and summer, it's called off-season. So again, at off-season also there is not much of a difference. As I said, the difference is only 6% between season off-season. So tourism department or the hoteliers and the industry could engage them in both the seasons positively, which we find it very, very happy news for us. Again, beyond the statistics, as I said, 3,100 households is not a huge number, but for that Gram Panchayat with only 5,000 households, it is a significant number. It was a sleepy Gram Panchayat before, now it is bustling with tourism activity and getting so much of revenue on its own. In fact, I would have been happy if Mr. Jose Dominic would have come here, being from the hotel industry. His hotel would have given the first-hand experience of how this has actually merged to become such a big initiative. So what has happened locally? Earlier, there was a big shift from the existing local tastes and local products to the Western products or to the modern products. With tourism coming up, they started reviving their own household items, local tastes. Crafts have been regained. Earlier, they were losing out to the multinationals. Music, the local music was lost to the other modern music that has been revived due to tourism. So come 2017, we are now thinking big. We decided that responsible tourism is not just going to be limited to these 5 destinations. We are going to take it completely across the state. So we have created something called a responsible tourism mission, which is a separate wing, independent wing under the Department of Tourism, Government of Kerala. It will be having 14 separate district cells, which it will implement the same experiences what we have done in Kumarakom area across the 14 districts of Kerala, which basically covers the north and south and east and west. We are going to leverage from the learning points from the Kumarakom experience. We had some problems on how the systems had to be could be prepared only across the last 10 years. In fact, there was a huge problem. I will give an example. The hotel industry refused to source local raw material. As I said, 48 products included vegetables, fruits. They said, we are a 5-star hotel, we need a special quality. The quality you are supplying is not enough. So what we did for that, we had a quality committee headed by the local Gram Panchayat leader. We had a government official. We included the chef of the Sdgs hotel group, which is the biggest hotel group in that area. They actually said that once they said its quality is assured, then of course everybody had to fall in place. So those learning points will be implementing in this responsible tourism mission of Kerala, and of course we'll be leveraging the local community participation and energy efficiency and water conservation, solid waste management, everything merged into the responsible tourism mission. We hope.
I think the big challenge, and I was looking at the topic of the session, is most people don't even know what the SDGs are. And I think this is where we start with our challenge. I was really impacted by the first video when someone was saying, and here we're contributing to SDG 8 and 12. It's like, wow, that's an amazing awareness of SDGs, but also communication about it. And I think this is probably the first challenge we will have, is to make people understand what the hell are the SDGs. And this is a UN agency, and we love jargon, as you can imagine. So just to start with, I'd like to recall that tourism is included in 3 of the SDGs. SDG 8, specifically the target 8.9, that says by 2030, devise and implement policies to promote sustainable tourism that creates jobs and promotes local culture and products. So very much about economic growth, job creation, social inclusion. Target number 12, talking about responsible consumption and production. There you have another nice sentence from a UN. So try to communicate this to local people. Target 12.b, develop and implement tools that can monitor sustainable development impacts, and that's very important for sustainable tourism, again, that creates jobs, promotes local culture and products. And finally, target 14.7 in SDGs 14 on life below water, that says by 2030, increase the economic benefit of small island development states and least developed countries for the sustainable use of marine resources, including through sustainable management of fisheries, aquaculture, and tourism. So from a commitment point of view, states have to report on those 3 elements. So this is where our challenge begins, because most of these are not measured. We can measure arrivals, receipts. A lot of countries are starting to measure employment. So as we go along the way, there's 2 challenges. One is to actually make people understand how we can contribute to the SDGs, but at a national level, countries will have to report on all the SDGs ultimately, and they will have to report on these 3 specific targets. From our point of view at UNWTO, what we try to communicate and raise awareness is that although tourism is mentioned in 3 of them, very specifically, with very specific commitment, we can actually contribute to all of them. And I think this is where we need to position ourselves to be relevant, because governments, funding institutions, companies will look at the sector when we can actually make this link. And we always say that we can contribute to all of them. If you look at what we've heard today, we're contributing to SDG number 1, end poverty. Many of the examples included gender equality programs. So we're also contributing to SDG number 5. And I think this is the challenge, to link whatever we do with each of the SDGs. We started to do that at UNWTO in our planning, also in our reporting. So basically we say we're doing this activity is contributing to SDG 1, 3, 4, depending on the focus. And this is very important from a policy perspective. We had some case studies at very local level. We went to the state level with Kerala, and here we're looking at government level. And the challenge is that governments themselves include tourism in their national policies for SDGs. We did an analysis that we will publish by the end of this year, looking at 64 voluntary national reports on SDGs, where countries voluntarily say, this is what I've done so far on SDGs, this is my plan. And we, analyzing those 64 that we call VNRs, realized that 2/3 of them actually mention tourism. So we still have a challenge. It's a good result, but many of them don't even mention the sector when it's mentioned in 3 of the targets, but it can contribute to others. We also saw that most of the governments refer to tourism when talking about SDG 8, 12, and 17 on partnerships, and this is very important due to the necessity of working alongside the private sector. And we also looked at global companies. We looked at the CSR policies of around 60 companies, also to do the same matching. How can we link CSR policies with each of the SDGs? Because I always say, coming from a communication background, language and words matter. So when we talk about SDGs, instead of talking about energy, water, Then from a political level, your audience, if they're responsible for the SDGs, they will understand. And this is something that we want to advance furthermore. We'll be publishing this report at the end of the year as a legacy of the International Year of Sustainable Tourism for Development, because what we want is to say this year was obviously a year of celebration, raising awareness, but we need as a sector to have a roadmap that takes us from now to 2030, and that roadmap is what do governments need to do, what do private companies need to do to actually contribute to the 17 SDGs. So there will be recommendations for all stakeholders on how actually can this be advanced. And for us, the most important point is for governments at each country, whoever is responsible for the national SDG strategy, to make sure that tourism can be heard. Because if the Minister of Tourism is not even included in that discussion, then no one will look into our sector. So moving down from the SDG umbrella and coming to the discussion of today on SDG 8 and SDG 12, I just wanted to share some thoughts with you on what actually can we do to make sure that those SDGs work for communities. And I divided them in 3 areas. 1, policy, the 2nd, businesses, and the 3rd, consumers, because they can make a big difference as well. The first one on policy is raising awareness. And I liked very much the first case study and the data reporting, because without data, we cannot do advocacy. People will listen to you when you have the data to show that you have made a difference. So we need to prove that empowering communities can actually contribute to the SDGs 8 and 12. That's the only way we can make our point. The second one has to do with regulation and incentives. This is not new, but more and more countries need to include local suppliers in their investment legislation, promote the inclusion of communities in value chains, and we saw some examples of how handicrafts can be sold in lodges, but this should be something that happens in mainstream hotels as well, more and more, and how it can incentivize startups and entrepreneurship. Then there's a responsibility in terms of policy to develop adequate products and also to help promotion beyond just the mainstream destinations and products. And 4th, very important, capacity building and education. We saw that from the beginning. If it's not owned by the communities, development will never happen. The second part on businesses, again, that they see the value of using local suppliers. And here consumers can make a difference, because more and more consumers value different kinds of supplies, especially when we talk about gastronomy, when we talk about also furniture, when we talk about any kind of giveaways. Second, the inclusion of communities, as I mentioned, in value chains. I think often we think about community development as something small. Major business and mainstream media need to be part of this. Again, they can help with training and capacity building, and CSR strategies linked to consumer satisfaction. Again, we need to make sure that companies more and more can link their strategies with the SDGs. Finally, on consumers, there's a trend that people want to learn, they want a human angle, and the technology angle. So there's a huge opportunity to use consumers for that change as well, and if they demand it, it will help. I wanted to finish with something that our colleagues from South Africa mentioned on the respect. And I must say I was very, very inspired by the presentation. And we developed for the International Year of Sustainable Development a campaign that we call Travel, Enjoy, Respect, on the principles of enjoy nature, enjoy culture, but respect it, especially nature, culture, and most importantly, respect your hosts. So I'll leave you with a small video of the campaign, if I can master technology.